To get great tension on your Kitchener stitch, I have a couple of good tips for you. So the first one is when you cut your yarn. 1, 2, 3 times the width of the stitches that you need to bind off, plus about another 6 inches for weaving in, is all you need on your tail. So go ahead and cut any extra yarn that you have that might get in your way while you're doing Kitchener stitch, okay? Well, you don't want to cut it too short. That would be worse, okay? So a little bit longer is better, but 3 times the width of the stitches plus 6 inches for weaving in is all you need. Now, I'm going to do Kitchener stitch, which I've taught you in another video, and I'm going to talk about my tips for you as we go. Okay? So as we go in, knit, off, purl, go ahead and take off the stitch as you go instead of, this is as you get comfortable. First, if you're confused by Kitchener stitch, you just do all the steps separately, but once you feel like you know what you're doing, go ahead and take the stitch off as you pull the yarn through. That way already you can see, how did I do? Am I pulling too tight? Is it way too loose? Like, you can already see what's going on with what you've done. Okay, so we're going to go knit, off, purl. Right here. Right here is where the tension issues happen, right? So you're going to pull the yarn all the way through. You're not going to pull it tighter than this. You don't want the stitches to be just like jammed up next to each other, but you also don't want everything very loose, right? So what you can do to help that is make sure that these needles, the back and the front needle, are close together, okay? You do not want them like this, where you're just like trying to figure out what's going on. You leave the other one way back here all by itself, and you can see how easy it is to let way too much yarn go through, right? Although I have to tell you that if it's too loose, it's very easy to tighten up Kitchener stitch after you're done. If the whole thing is too loose, you can just use your tapestry needle and kind of pick the loose stitches down the line and tighten it up as you go. It's much harder to take out a tight Kitchener stitch, so beware of pulling too tight. That's why you want to look and see what you are doing as you're going. Okay. Now we're going to go purl, off, and here is where we do a little tug. Right when you take the stitch off is when you do a tug, and just make sure that you can see your yarn. Make sure you see what you're doing. Not too tight, not too loose, just snug. So we're going to go purl, off, knit, and right there, this is where the tension is happening, right when you're pulling everything snug. So what I would do after every couple stitches is kind of massage the bind off, see where your yarn is, give it some tugs, and see how it's looking. Okay, whoops, sorry about that. See how it's looking so you can see if you're doing it too tight as a habit or too loose. Let's do some more. Knit, off, purl. Right here is where the tension is happening, and see how I've got my finger sort of down in here so that I'm like stretching the bind off out and making this is where the seam is going to be. You might want to try that. Purl, off, knit. And here is where all the tension is happening, so I'm going to push this down and let the bind off close up. And that way I can see just right, not too tight, not too loose. And again, if it's too loose, it's okay, so you might want to err on the side of being too loose. So just like when you're knitting, you're not pulling. I hope that your tension is good when you're knitting and you're not pulling desperately against the yarn trying to form your stitches. No, you're working with the yarn. The tools that you have, the size needles that you're using, help you to form the right size stitches. We don't have that for Kitchener stitch, which is why you can accidentally pull it too tight. So right here is where you want to try to make a stitch that's about the same size as the other stitches that you're knitting right here. Again, too loose is better than too tight. So just check every once in a while. That's the best thing I can do. Like here I'm noticing, okay, this looks a little bit loose, right? So if I want to, I can actually grab it where it's a little bit too loose, follow the yarn around. You don't actually have to be too careful about this, because if it's not the yarn of the bind off, nothing will move. You'll be like, oh, that's not it, but here, this is it right here. So you can actually just pull whatever's loose and tighten it up. Now that's a little bit tighter. So the main tips are definitely check every so often as you're going. You don't want to discover that it was too tight after you do, 10, 20, 30 stitches, because you can absolutely take Kitchener stitch out, and I've taken it out myself a bunch as I've recorded this series of Kitchener stitch videos, so it can be done, but it's time consuming. Here's the bind off. It's a little loose. You can just grab it, pull it. There you go. See how we tightened it up? And just massage it and check as you go. Make sure you like the way it looks. And your Kitchener stitch, it shouldn't have any corners, any ears, anything on it. Oh, you know what? I forgot to show you the setup stitches at the beginning. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I was so intent on teaching you techniques about tension that I forgot to do the setup stitches. So if this looks a little funky right here, that's why. This should look perfect. Sorry about that. I was just thinking about what tips am I going to give you for tension. But this to me looks like good tension. The stitches definitely should be the same size and stretchiness as the rest of the fabric. Okay, I have one last tip for you. No, I have two last tips. Knit off, purl. We don't have a last purl stitch. Purl off, knit. Alright, my last tips are for you. Number one, experience and time is going to help you a lot with getting your tension right. Okay, the more you do it, the better you're going to learn what works for you. So, sorry if I got a little off there on my stitches, mostly just thinking about tension. You can see it was pretty loose when we started out, right? If I wanted to, I actually could take the tapestry needle and just pull on, you just pull on the loose bit. Okay, you just pull the loose bit and it will naturally tighten up. Don't pull too hard. We don't want to knit angry. And then, so experience doing Kitchener stitch 5, 10, 15, 20 times, like you're going to get better at it. So don't expect yourself to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, don't take it as a sign that you can't do it. That would be a big mistake and completely incorrect, right? Like I don't even know what stitch I was pulling on there, but it wasn't the seam. It wasn't the Kitchener stitch. So anyway, be careful with what you pull on a little bit, but you can see that we tightened up those first stitches a bit. So experience, and then a positive attitude. Never worry. Don't take it too seriously. Learn from your mistakes as you go, and that attitude is going to help you be very happy with your Kitchener stitch and keep learning if you find that there are things that you want to improve.